Hello, everyone. Welcome to the panel, A Link Between Worlds. If you've been to any conventions recently, such as BLFC, FWA, you might have seen an installation somewhere that lets you see in on the other side to interact with your friends in VRChat. So I got a small audience in front of me. Quick show of hands. Have any of you interacted with one of these portals either physically or virtually? Let's see a whole bunch of hands going up. I can't see you all in chat, but feel free to shout out if you have also seen one of those and give the mods a bad day. So at this panel, what I want to do is kind of go over the diversity that we've seen in portal installations that have happened so far, because it's more than just one exact thing. And there have been a number of them this year so far. And then after that, I want to sort of give more insight into how you go about setting one of these up so that you can go out to, the cons coming up and help run these yourself and sort of keep the magic going. So a quick bit about myself. I'm Texel. I've been world building for a couple of years, got started working on a project with MagFest to bring their convention into VR after everything sort of got canceled with the pandemic. And that event, unfortunately, didn't go anywhere, but ultimately morphed into the concept of bringing a portal into that convention. And that was the first one that I was involved with. And after that, I think that we helped serve as an inspiration for more of the events that would follow. I am also part of the creative team here at Furality as their primary Udon programmer. So moving in, what is a portal? The most simple way that I can describe it is that you have two-way video capture between a location in virtual reality and a location in a physical place. So I can look at a screen and wave, and you'll see me waving in VR, and they can wave back, and I will see that, and we have some form of communication. So what that means is that if you say, go to a panel and take your laptop and hook it up to a projector and log into VRChat, that's not quite a portal. It's really just a one-directional communication at that point. But it isn't too much more to bridge that gap and get the whole thing. I could try to describe more about what these portals look like, how they differ, but I think that I think showing you in the form of a video would be much more powerful. So let's roll the sequence. Yeah. So, to be continued. We're about halfway through 2022 right now, and we have had a number of these projects come along. They've all been stupidly successful, I think, and tons of fun. And there's a number of conventions coming up. Which ones will be the next ones to have a portal? That is in large part up to all of you to work with your conventions and try to plan that. So, looking at all that footage, there's a lot of different kinds of setups going on. And it's also a reminder to me of why I have so much fun and so much attraction to these things when I'm actually at the convention. It's almost like being there with your friends without them being here with you. So, hopefully that was all a pretty good demonstration of that. So we got a little timeline here of all the conventions that I know of that have had these portals going, starting in January with MagFest and JMOF running theirs exactly the same weekend. And I think JMOF might have run one even like before all of this. Maybe they were the first. I don't really know all the details there, but MagFest was where we got started. Then, a couple months later, Vancouver sort of took up the mantle and got something going, followed by Furdu down in Australia. Then FWA came along, and oh boy, that was a busy weekend with Furality Gateway happening and FWA doing its own thing. And that was also the same weekend that VRChat did its thing with Shelter, and they had a portal, and then some other party was going on and had a portal. There are more portals in like one day than there was in the rest of the year up to that point. And then just recently at BLFC, I helped run a portal setup there. So just running through all those quickly to sort of see the differences, see the setups. I think JMOF had one of the most basic ones. Where you had, the two-way video, you could wave at each other, you had some presence. They had a surprisingly compact setup. And the venue that they used is a recreation of their hotel. And they actually created one of the more authentic, I'd say, mirror experiences where you're literally looking through to the other side in the same exact place and seeing your friends. For all the projects that try to recreate their venue, that's sort of like the holy grail of what you want to create. I want to create the mirror experience, but then you find out that, where your portal got stuck by the convention, doesn't translate to something nice in VR. So it doesn't always work out. MagFest, case in point, we also recreated our venue in VR. And when we set up our portal at the physical space, we were sort of at the mercy of where they were going to stick us. And they gave us a registration box in the middle of a hallway. That's not a very interesting location at all. It is like a bare wall across the way. And we tried setting up a portal there and ultimately just moved it to a much more interesting space in the VR, which you see on the side here. We also did some other experimentation with the giant Jumbotron screen that they have, where we had the portal output to that instead. It was cool for about 30 seconds, I would say. More of a spectacle than a rich interactive experience. Then we moved to Vancouver, and we kind of get something totally different here. First of all, they didn't recreate their world. They created something brand new to sort of work with their theme. And they kind of like stuck it in their virtual dealer's den. But on the other side, this is a portal that didn't have audio like MagFest did, but was put right into their dance hall. And it was life-size. It was like a 14-foot screen, with rear projection. It's dark in there, so it shows up pretty well. You got the booming audio, and everybody in VR is dancing along with everybody in real space. And it doesn't matter that there's no audio. You couldn't hear anyone anyway, but it's a different, rich experience. Then, at Purdue, a month later, it basically completely replicated. They also created a brand new world for their theme. They had a very similar dance setup, similar equipment. Then we get to FWA, and we're seeing more of the same. A large projection set up in the dance hall. In this case, they're using the venue they recreated during COVID, or that I created. And so they actually got a pretty authentic mirror experience there, kind of like JMOF, but dance-wise. You may have seen a lot of this glow dog in footage that was playing. That's because he's been involved with a lot of these Portal experiences so far, at least all the ones with the dance setup. He's probably been involved with more of them than I have at this point. And the Tail-based community that he runs has become an integral part of managing these setups, because you need VR presence and moderation to make these happen. And that's where a lot of that happens these days. So, concurrently with FWA, we had Furality Gateway. If you were fortunate to be able to check out Gateway, this was more than just a portal. It was actually a very rich, immersive experience. The whole room was themed. We even had like the Luma smell being pumped in. And then we had a really cool portal utilizing a holographic projection technique instead, which nobody else that I know of has done for these. So you get a somewhat richer experience, a very interesting take. It's very hard to see, but on the VR side, we created a special location within Finn's room with a sort of a mirror that you could approach. It would turn into the portal and see all your friends. And finally, the most recent event, BLFC, is maybe the most humble of all of these. And BLFC was very interesting to me as an experiment, because not only is the setup very simple, we're using a television, PC components, a webcam that was also our microphone, and no special draw around it. There's no concert hall, there's no jam pod across the way. But it turns out it didn't matter. Everybody had lots of fun with it. So these things are just cool on their own. So that brings us to, how would we go about setting up one of these ourselves at a future con? What do we need to think about? So that slide should be later. But let's talk about that virtual setup. We're thinking about a world. What makes a good world for a VRChat portal? At the very minimum, you need a compatible video player. It's kind of like all that there is as a technical requirement. Then you can start thinking about what you want the world to be. So you could try recreating your venue, which a number of these have done. That's a lot of work. Or you could try creating something that fits your theme, like Purdue did, or that Furality did, kind of inverted. Or if you're not feeling like you want to do a lot of work, a small optimized world would be great, because people lag in these things. You're going to get 60 plus people trying to crowd that little section. Help them out. You could stick this in like optimized box, honestly, just stick a video player right in the middle of the room. Totally viable. But the physical setup, the first thing you need to do is, can you get your con on board? Who's going to be your champion at the convention? You can't just show up and set one of these up. Maybe you can in a meetup panel as a very temporary one. But if you want something running all weekend, you have to have their buy-in. They have to find you space. They have to get you set up with network, probably. And, in all that, there's various considerations. Is your location going to be secured? So for a couple of these installations, we had things set up in a registration box. with the PC behind a locked, roll-down door. That has a great benefit in that you don't have to fully attend it necessarily. You can kind of leave it alone for a while because your stuff will mostly be safe. If it's sitting out in the middle of a room, or if the whole room itself is the experience, you have to have someone there watching over everything. And as for networking, ideally, you'll get a wired network from your convention, but it may not be possible. It may be expensive. Is there Wi-Fi infrastructure going to be able to support you streaming and playing VRChat? Maybe. That's what you have to talk to them about. But you may be able to get by on a mobile hotspot, unless you're at FWA, in which case you can't even connect to Discord or Telegram. But for the first day and a half at MagFest, we actually ran our portal off of a mobile hotspot. And I think we used about 10 gigs of data over that time. And it worked. Our phone would disconnect every couple hours, which was annoying, and we'd have to go reconnect it, but it ran until we got a permanent connection. Equipment-wise, it's not that, doesn't have to be that sophisticated. You need a powerful enough computer, so a gaming PC or laptop, to be able to both run VRChat in desktop mode and do streaming. And you need a display. BLFC, we use a large TV. Most setups use some sort of projection setup. And then you need a capture device, so a camera, webcams pretty much will be just fine. Or maybe a GoPro. You don't need anything super wide angle because then, people are going to be over here or whatever. Things get a little more complicated if you want to add audio to the mix. So now you need speakers, you need a microphone, and preferably something directional and not the webcam itself, because your big enemy here is going to be feedback. And everybody in VR is going to hear themselves delayed by 2 or more seconds, and they will probably be pretty unhappy about that. It's very hard to fix. Getting back to the virtual side, I said that the bare minimum is you need a video player. I think most SDK3 video players would probably do the job. You need something AV Pro based. I think just about all of them are either exclusively AV Pro based or at least supported as a mode. So it's also called stream mode in a lot of players. You also want your player to support auto reconnect. So if the stream goes down, nobody has to go put a URL back in or push a button or anything. It will just reconnect on its own for everybody in the instance, because you're going to be restarting that stream periodically. It's just going to happen. The video player that I use everywhere is my own that I wrote, and I use it throughout my roles in Furality and all that. That's Video TXL, but it's certainly not the only one that you can use. You can go down that from my GitHub. But I'm going to give you a little hint. I don't actually use the full player when I set up events like this. I don't use that full player when we're running the stream in Club Fin or in the panel room or whatever. I'm using another prefab in that package called Local Stream Player. And it's something that has no network sync at all. So it's kind of immune from random network sync problems with VRChat. It's more durable for events, but the URL's earned in. You can't change it. Screen. It doesn't have to be fancy, but you don't want it, up in the air, where nobody can see it. You're going to want to have your camera back behind this thing. So you're going to want it level with the players. You're going to want it big enough to either sort of match what's going on the other side, or to be kind of lifelike. And so, right here we have the setup from MagFest. We set up some truss and then put the screen in there, and here's a reference Nargacuga for scale. They're about 6 feet tall. By the way, reference Nargacuga is an official thing at Furality. I recommend that everybody has a reference Nargacuga for their projects. As I said, the camera's going to be behind the screen, whether that's a camera in the world or just a bot with its own camera or just its desktop view. And it's going to be just shooting out from the back of that. So if you're not going to set up a world camera and you're going to use just the bot, make sure you can actually put the bot behind there and not just right up against the wall. Finally, you probably want to stop people from walking right up to it, because they're going to also like take over the whole camera on the other side. So maybe put a small barrier there and keep them back a ways. Now the camera, I mentioned that you might have a world camera setup. So you put a camera, behind the screen in Unity. You'll have it configured. The clipping plane will start at the screen and go out some ways. Make sure you have the right layers set on it. This is where you make decisions of, do I want player nameplates to show up or not? Some of the portals have done player nameplates that help some people. Some of them have excluded it to just kind of make it a cleaner experience, or at least a more anonymous one. Other settings, field of view, view distance, all play with, see what kind of works best. But then, we often use something that I'm calling a bot box, where you have a cube that is the camera texture sort of pasted on the inside in, is it screen space? And you literally take your bot and sit it inside that cube, and no matter where it looks, it's always going to see exactly the same thing. And you can take your own camera and stick it in there, and the same thing will happen. So that just makes it easy to have everything set up exact without having to deal with positioning. Another consideration with placing something like this, it needs to be really close to where you're watching the people, because VRChat has VRChat varies its IK based on distance. People far away don't get high resolution IK, so you want it within like 5 meters. And then some final considerations would be like lighting. Make sure it's bright enough. Most worlds are not going to be bright enough by default. They might look fine, but on the other side, everyone's just going to look dark. So, boost it up. And that applies on the physical side too. It might be too dark for them to see, as was the case with Gateway. Visual boundaries help people. So, put some lines down. Show them where they can stand, that they'll be captured. That's where picture-in-picture also comes into play, so they can see a preview of themselves. And then other things would be like moderation. As I said, VR moderation is important, and the more tools you can give them, the better. So for some of these, we've set up a little tablet that they can carry around that has a preview of what the bot sees, and a button that will cut the stream by replacing that texture with just a placeholder. And they can toggle that on and off at the snap of a finger. So if they see something bad pop up, they can cut that feed so it's not showing up in the physical world, and then they can go deal with the problem, whether they kick or use some other moderation prefab. So the anatomy of a VR portal. What we have here is the mirror from Finn's room for Furality Gateway. And I've brightened it up a little bit because it's really, really dark in there. And there's something kind of weird going on with this this screen here. It's like, I don't know, what's going on with that box? Well, maybe this will help shed some light on that. So we've got, our area where we're capturing with the camera. Got the screen, and then right behind that is that bot box that I mentioned. It's literally buried in the stone. You can't see it, but the bot's sitting in there. It's actually sitting on a station, an invisible chair. So we can actually point that thing to, look up at an angle if it's down on the floor or whatever, without having to fiddle with it. Finally, we get to streaming, because you're going to have to get the feed from the physical location out into VRChat. Coming back the other way is a lot easier, potentially. I recommend connecting your PC directly to a projector or TV. You have no latency, no additional setup. A++ would recommend again. if you really don't or want to do that or can't do that, can run a bot on a remote PC. And now you have another leg of stream that you have to deal with. So now that PC has to run OBS. It has to send the stream out either to some relay or run an RTMP server itself. And then that has to come down to whatever device is going to display to your projector or TV in the physical world. We had to do something like this at BLFC when we moved the portal to the stage for the meetup. Because the PC was over, across the room in the Reg booth. So we got some help getting that all set up and kind of routing that across the room with a RTMP server installed on the PC. It had a pretty big drawback, and we couldn't do a picture-in-picture anymore, just because of how that setup works. That's a little more advanced. Then on the other side, there's stream to VR. That's the one-to-many broadcast that streams running on the player. Don't use Twitch. Never, ever use Twitch for this. The latency is going to be too high. Use VRCDN. That is the short, simple truth. I see Roxy giving it. Yeah, VRCDN. It just works. If you really have, special requirements, you can try and do a setup. But it's a lot more work, more expense. And then the capture PC can be the same PC running the bot, as long as it's powerful enough to run both. I've got some example OBS settings here. These are what we settled on for our MagFest portal. They work pretty well for us. That doesn't mean that they are going to be the exact best settings for your setup, however. And so you may need to play with them a bit. When I run these on my local PC just to test stream, they don't work very well. But they have worked just fine for the portal setups. So that's the starting point. I just got the OBS settings here that you can look at, but they're probably hard to see. But what I actually really recommend is, did anyone watch Roxy's panel on Friday? If you didn't watch Roxy's panel, go back and watch the recording, because Roxy went into a huge amount of depth on streaming, all of which is relevant to running VR portals. Anything that you would care about streaming-wise is in there. So thank you, Roxy, for a great presentation. Part of all that setup with OBS and streaming is setting up your picture-in-picture for both the VR and the physical side. So for the physical side, we use something called a windowed projector. You can basically right-click on your OBS, and it's an option, or in the menu, I don't remember which. And it pops up a little window that's just showing your camera output, and you can drag it up into the middle or the corner or whatever. And just keep that running on top of the VRChat window, and everybody that's interacting with the portal will be able to see themselves. For the VR side, you can create an additional source in OBS to capture your desktop view and just kind of stick that into a corner somewhere, and that will get played back to everybody in VR. And they'll see themselves, but they'll see themselves with a delay. They'll actually be able to see exactly how much latency they are dealing with trying to communicate with you. So in a sense, it's actually kind of useful. The final element of all this is, how are you actually going to run your event? You've got all the technical details sorted out. You've got a location. You've got a world. But now you got to run the thing. How many hours are you going to run this for? It's not going to be around the clock. Just don't do it. It's hard enough to run it for part of the day. For all the hours that you're going to run your portal for, you have to have moderators lined up. People who are going to be present in VR to watch for anything bad happening, kick them, trigger the mod panel, whatever. Or tell you that, tell somebody that, it went down, go kick the box. So you need to, actually get a spreadsheet, get people on there, get volunteers. It's a lot more work than it feels when you're thinking about this. And huge shout out again to Tailbase for basically managing this part for a whole bunch of these portals so far. Not all of them, but certainly at least half of them. They've been a huge help. Instance management also kind of plays into that. Are you going to try and just keep the same instance open as long as it can go until everything crashes and burns? Or are you going to refresh it on a regular basis? Who's going to own it? If you have your moderators own it and create it on a schedule, they can kick people. That's useful. But you could have it owned by the bot or a separate management account that, people could log into with Parsec, and then they also have kick rights that way. Physical staff, who's going to watch the equipment, who's going to watch the experience there. Kind of depends on that setup, whether it's, secured, unsecured. You may not have to have people all the time just watching that thing, but you will have to have people on call. Stuff happens. Things go down. So that's kind of all the major elements of running a VRChat portal, setting up a VRChat portal. But I want to come back to Furality Gateway, which I, didn't pay that much attention to, at least in the intro video there. But Furality Gateway was, a much more than just a portal. Like, what can a portal be if we have a much bigger team to run it and a bigger budget to run it? You can actually create very immersive, interesting experiences around it where the portal is just one component. It's also a great way to experiment with new ideas, new technologies. They incorporated the holographic screen to try and get even more immersion than we've seen at previous installs. And that was really cool, but we also learned that there's certain trade-offs with that too, based on like where we position the camera inside. Kind of made it hard for the VR people to see what was going on. So, it's not, even if you have the budget for that, it's not necessarily a 100% win, but it was cool. So I kind of want to close out Gateway with just giving you all, at least everyone who didn't have a chance to see it in person, some insight into how that was created and what happened, what went on, what kind of really cool experiences we saw, people communicating, which, to me, those are the moments that make it all worth it. Let's roll the video.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Craig, and I'll have the pleasure of joining you in this wonderful convention. I assume many of you have already seen something like me. Yet, perhaps it might be good to give a small catching up for those who might still be unfamiliar with what's going on here. The future is now, and virtual reality has become part of many people's lives. With a VR headset,
It's so fucking real.
We have some special guests coming over.
He's giving a beat, someone start rapping.
It's too inconsistent for
The signing I thought was particularly special at the end. Being able to communicate like that in the real world, in VR, not even spoken words. The signing community just in VRChat alone has been super impressive to me, and seeing that across the portal was even more special. And then we see other special moments, things like sharing music with each other. We saw it at MagFest with the jam pod right across the portal, which was a complete accident, by the way, but a very wonderful one. Or just the spontaneous acts we saw at Furality Gateway, or even, the portals set up in the dance halls where that was the whole point. Just really incredible. And I hope that we get to see more of that at cons coming up, and hopefully some of you will be at the forefront of making that happen. I want to make a final shout out to the people who have helped make this possible, particularly CNLore, GP Lord, and Madman from MagFest, who helped get this all started. And then folks like Mblade, who have been at the forefront of many of these other projects in the furry community. Just absolutely phenomenal. Thank you all. So at this point, I think that I'm ready to take some questions.
Let me go bring up those questions for you right now. Okay. I have one from Mini Kitty Lily. They ask, I have a question. What is the easiest way to find out when those portals will be set up? How do I get involved in the VR side of these portals?
I'm not sure if the QA box is on. You sound a little quiet, so I'm going to repeat the question.
Oh, let me go check that.
The question is, how can I get involved with these projects, especially on the VR side? And I think a great place to start would be popping into the Tailbase Discord server. Introduce yourself, say hello, let us know you're interested in these projects. Because, Tailbase is not specifically a community for portals, it's, a dance community. But it has grown into more than that and encompasses this. So that is a great way to meet up with the people who are going to be running these projects.
I have a question from Meep Crux. They ask, would a portal be possible between Second Life and VRChat?
Ooh. I don't see why not. You would just be feeding streams from one side to the other, but I can't speak to the technical side in setting anything up in Second Life. I don't know what the capabilities are there, but I don't see a barrier either. If you can put a stream into into Second Life, it should be possible to set up that link, and that's a very interesting idea. I've never thought about trying to set up that kind of a link between two virtual spaces that are completely separate.
Okay. Akalink asks, seeing your diagram, it looks like your camera is orthographic, but are you able to use the camera in an orthographic or perspective view?
The camera was not set up orthographic. I don't know if the diagram was misleading there. It was a perspective setup.
Same. Circle IRL asks, how do you handle world moderation? Should we implement our own solutions as VRChat natively doesn't have a quick way to kick people? I.e., voting people off has a delay or relies on other people in the VRChat to initiate.
Yeah, so should we implement our own moderation solutions because VRChat does not offer something good enough? And the answer is yes. In the previous slide, I showed the little tablet that we had. That's something that I created for the MagFest portal and that we reused for a couple other projects. And I'll be putting out some of this stuff as prefabs as well. Probably linked somewhere with my video player so you can find it. So just so you have this stuff to help you with future projects. But yeah, that is one option. You can come up with your own. There are some other solutions to help. There's Remajo's moderation panel that you can buy that does really funny things, like dropping bombs on people to remove them or whatever. But all these can help when you don't have the tools from VRChat. But if your moderators happen to own your instance, you at least have the ability to kick that way as well.
Okay. Kitty asks, it was a bit hard to see from the video, but did the Furality Gateway holographic screen actually portray depth?
I think that it did portray depth to a point. So the main benefit you get from that screen is you get parallax with the background. So as you move around, it doesn't look completely flat. And if somebody in VR being projected on that screen kind of runs back, they actually look like they're running back in that space. They sort of lift off the ground, and you do get that impression of depth. But it is not a true hologram. You can't look to the side and see the side of their head when you couldn't before. So it's a compromise effect, I guess. But it is neat.
Okay. And we only have one more time for only one more question. And let's see, where is... Party Cat asks, what ends up being the cost of the portals, like for the projectors at FWA, for example?
I can't speak to the cost of what Furality set up. It's certainly a lot more than the other portals. For MagFest, our budget was basically zero. We brought all of our equipment in. For BLFC, also 0. We brought all our equipment in. For some of the other ones, they might have had equipment provided by the con, but I don't think the setups would be that much. They don't create a big impact on the con budget. But that's also stuff that you have to talk about your con with. Will they give you any budget, or are they gonna be like, yeah, bring your own stuff if you want to do this? We'll maybe give you the space. So with that being the last question, thank you all. Feel free to reach out to me if you are trying to set up a portal and you're not sure where to go. I'll be happy to answer questions, and I'll be answering in the QA Discord a little later. Thank you.